All right, so segment 3 that we're going to do is on personal development. And as we were making the agenda for this, I hesitated to put personal development on here a little bit because I think it's something that people use as a distraction a lot of times or as a way to prevent themselves from going to work. So I think everything that Easton and I are going to talk about, you should put with the caveat of if you're like new to business or you're just starting out, if you're making a choice between time spent doing personal development or time spent doing activity that can make you money and generate revenue, you have to do the generating revenue first, right? And you have to spend more of your time working through whatever you're, so like with what we do with sales, like you spend more of your time making phone calls and talking to clients and learning by just doing a lot of activity. And then personal development will help along the way as in addition to that during non-income producing hours, right? So for me, what I've started doing to get this in, and I used to, try to figure out time to read, work out, do all these things. Now I listen to a lot of audiobooks and podcasts and don't do any music while I'm working out. And it allows me to get, 2 birds with 1 stone. But the reason I wanted to include this, I recently attended a leadership training at Integrity that was put on by the Ziegler Corporation. And one of the things they talked about on there was this wheel of life assessment, which we'll send out to everyone. But they gave us these cool books. We'll email it out to you. But basically it was something where you had to do like a personal audit on yourself. And you go through all these different categories. And again, we'll send all this stuff out. So don't feel like you have to write it all down now. But it's physical, financial, spiritual, personal, mental, career, and family. And you basically ranked yourself on a scale of like 1 to 10 with how good you are at each, subset of those categories. And I looked at mine and my wheel was a little jacked up in some places. Like it was really good in some areas, not so good in other areas. And it made me realize how important it is to be really well-rounded. So I think a lot of these things are things you can work on and should be aware of, but you should not use this. It's not working. It's not income producing activities. It's extra credit, but it's not, you don't get to consider personal development time as work time. So want to throw that out there, but we do want to help people become really well-rounded. And I think it's great people, read and do things to better themselves on top of sales training, other things just to help them get better and to think differently and think critically. And we want to recommend a book every time we come on here, a different book that someone's read. So I have Easton on, and I attended another meeting at Integrity Marketing Group in maybe it was beginning of June. It was their annual partner meeting, and Brian Adams, who if y'all don't know Brian Adams and his story, look it up. I don't want to go through it on here, but he created Integrity Marketing Group, and he recommended a book called Start With Why, which is a really great book. And I recommended it to our top people to read it as well because Brian recommended it, and I think, I'm like, okay, Brian's in charge. If he recommends something, it's got to be pretty good. So I'm just going to recommend it to our guys so I don't mess it up. But I'd love, Easton, for you to share 1 or 2 takeaways. And then, I think encourage people, I'm just encouraging people to go ahead and read this stuff and to, learn as we're learning and get better as we're getting better because we're all trying to get better along the way. So if you have a couple takeaways from the books, things you've read, and maybe any, changes you've made to including this stuff, physically, mentally, whatever you're doing to help yourself be a more well-rounded person, I'd love for you to share.
Well, thanks, dude. So I wrote down a couple of different notes that I've got from the book so far. So I've got like a little bit left to go on it. One thing that we've talked about before is like routine for me has always been really important. And I think that there's a balance about the routine. Like if your routine takes you from 5 o'clock in the morning to noon before you're allowed to start working, I don't think that that's a good routine to have in place long-term because I think you're losing a lot of time getting distracted by, I've got to follow my routine. So having some kind of like base routine and like, why are you doing that routine? They didn't talk about maybe that as much in the book, but if it all starts with why, like, why do you do the things that you do in the morning? Like I do my morning routine because I figured out that's what helps me get started, keeps my energy higher throughout the day. I feel better when I do it. So like I do a couple things every single day and it started incorporating this reading or listening to audiobooks while I'm exercising instead of getting through like a new album or listening to something that's going to pump me up all the time, like having a dual focus, kind of, again, 2 birds, 1 stone. So the book, and it's stuff that we have talked about, and it's cool that it comes from such a really high level. Simon, is it Sinek that wrote it?
Yeah.
So the first one, he talks about companies run into trouble when they lose a sense of why, like as a whole. So you can see that in organizations when you're just doing things to accomplish a what, like I would like to get this thing. without like, why do you want that thing? Or like, why is it important for you to do this, instead of like, hey, just do this because. So you see a lot of like, I don't know if you call it burnout maybe, but if you're always just doing it for what's and there's no purpose of why behind your actions, like why do you get on the phone at 7:30 instead of just like, hey, this is what people have been doing for this long and it works, but they don't have a sense of why it's important to do for them necessarily.
Yeah.
So as an organization, I think it's important to make sure that you have a direction as a company on like why you want to accomplish something. And that starts with like figuring out on an agent standpoint, why is it important to you? Why do you want to do this job? We talk about that literally all the time when we're talking to brand new guys coming on, is why do you think that this is a good fit for you, and what are you willing to do to go through that? Like it has to be something more than just an object or a possession that you're chasing. So he talked about that a lot in the book, which I thought was pretty awesome. And then teams focused on what often fail, while those that start with a why are capable of extraordinary achievements. You know, again, maybe a pretty similar touch point, but it's pretty crazy what like Sean has been able to build, because why? You know, it was important to him to try to get the highest paid sales force in the business. And he wanted to do that because he himself struggled at a lower, contract when he was at his old company. So for him, it was like, why is this important to me? Because it's important for him to watch others succeed and not just go a certain direction by himself, which is something that we can take too. And you've done a great job with our group is, hey, this was the path given to me. So why it's important for you to continue to bring people in is because you owe it to the next group to figure out who else can you help, change their situation and give them an additional opportunity. So you are capable of a lot more if you have an enormous built why, and then you can kind of always have that to default on when you're going through stuff.
Yeah. And I think, and what we'll do right after this is we'll just go right into the business building one, because this book is really like how to build a business and how to build an effective agency. So we normally do that as a separate segment on this, but we're just going to roll right into it. But the couple of things I took away from the book too, and then we can kind of transition about how they can affect business, is the first one is like the path to having good, loyal, either customers or agent is not through manipulation. It's through doing the right thing for people no matter what, right? And so the example that they gave, and they kind of parlays into one other thing, is like people buy what you do, or people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it, right? So the example they gave a lot was like Apple was second to market with a lot of things. Like there was Zune, and they came out with the little Zune thingy, the pre-iPod, right?
Yep.
And they gave all these, like, it has X amount of gigabytes and this and that. And then Apple came out with the iPod, and we're like, you can carry 1,000 songs in your pocket, right? And so I think when we're all building our business or when we're serving clients, like one of the first things that I noticed when I started working with FFL was everyone said, like, did you help that family? Not did you make that sale, right? So I think it's really important to always revert back to that and understand that what we're doing, like if you get really good at something, no matter what it is, the money will follow. But you have to get really good and do it for the right reason. So if you're recruiting people, you have to be recruiting people with the intention to train them how to sell so that they can change their lives, so they can provide for their family, so they can change, maybe leave a legacy, whatever they want to do, make a bunch of whatever they want to do. You have to be recruiting for that reason, right? Same thing on the sales side. Like you have to be going out there and be getting really, really good at explaining to people, hey, this is what your situation looks like without insurance. Here's how this problem solves it, and do it for the reason of helping them and serving them, not so you can make a sale or not make a sale. And so I think that's, a big part of this I took from it. And they talked about, the other thing was like, you don't have to be the smartest or the best, which we've talked about for a long time. But so they gave the example of the Wright brothers, and then I forget the other one. But there was a guy who was funded like heavily by the government grants funding, had all this money. And the Wright brothers owned like a bicycle shop with a bunch of people that didn't graduate high school. And they figured out how to fly first. And they said that the reason they figured out how to fly first is because their goal was to make a flying machine that could help people transform the way that they travel. And the other guy's goal was to just be the first person and have the notoriety for figuring out how to fly. And as soon as the Wright brothers figured it out, the other guy, who I'm sure someone will comment the name in here, or Easton can look it up real quick while I'm stumbling through this. But the other guy, as soon as they figured out how to fly first and recorded the first flight, he completely stopped trying to go after it and trying to, trying to make a better plane or whatever, because he didn't care about that. He just wanted to be the first one. So I think it's really important to understand people know why you do what you're doing. And so when you're translating this into, wanting to build a business, I think you should tell people why you do what you do. And for me, for a long time, I didn't share this stuff at all with people, but I do what we do because I wanted to build a business that was going to be something that was, sustainable, where I could actually be serving people, because that was a big deal to me. Like I knew if I wanted to build a business, I wanted to be putting people in a better position. And I've been through things in life. Did you find the name on there?
Sam Langley.
Oh yeah, Sam Langley. Yep. So don't be a Sam Langley, right? But so like for me, building a business was because I'd been through things in life, and I'd seen, I don't want to go too far into detail in the story right now, just for the sake of time, but been through some health stuff with family and have seen what it looks like to have to choose between work and family. And I just never wanted to have to choose between those things. And I wanted to help people I knew be in a good financial situation and work for themselves, and not have to be, told when to come in and out of work, and when they want to take time off to spend time with their family, kids, whatever. It's like, that's why I wanted to do it. And I think whatever your why is, why you want to build a business, how much you like helping people, whatever it is, you should be willing to tell people and share your story, because people will want to follow you if they understand why you're doing it. If all you do is tell people you sell insurance and you can help make some money, there's nothing, that's pretty shallow, and no one will follow that. And then the last thing is that they mentioned in there is like the human desire to belong influences buying decisions. And I think that is, if you're someone who's building a business, it's important to understand that. Like, you have to do a really good job of building good relationships with, you don't have to be everyone's best friend, but build good relationships with people you're in business with, maintain those relationships, and don't take them for granted, and don't abuse them, right? Because it's way easier. It takes a long time to build a good, trusting relationship, and then it's really easy to ruin it, right? Like a really dumb and probably terrible example that I shouldn't give, but I'm going to anyways, is like, if you're married for 30 years and then you cheat on your wife, like, that's probably over, right? If it was my wife, it'd be over. So, but it took 30 years to build up to that trust level, and you can ruin it in a second, right? So if you're in business with people and it goes good for a really long time, just remember, like, one crazy outburst or one time where you do someone wrong can completely ruin that relationship. So make sure you're, thinking through and taking things from a 10,000 foot view, and building a long-term relationship, and understanding that, people want to belong, make people feel like they belong, part of your organization. And then on the sales side, like, that's how you close people, right? Hey, everyone, Easton, in your situation does this for this and this and this reason. So, which one of these do you want to do? Because people want to belong. And so you have to make sure you understand that you're making people belong, be part of the community. And like we talked about in the intro, like, that's why doing the cruise thing, I think, is such a big deal for FFL. I think if you're, wanting to build a team, you have to build that culture and that core, and make sure everyone knows that they belong. And don't be weird, don't be cliquey, don't only hire certain type of people. Like, just hire and work with people that are similar to you, or that can fit in with your vision, and work with them and build the relationships with them. So, Easton, as far as goes building a business, you guys have been doing a lot of things like that, like the lock-ins and all these sort of things. Is there anything that you took from, this book, or that you've just changed in general, that's helped you as far as building a business goes recently? Well,
I think just spending, more and more time getting to know everybody that you work with, instead of just like the easy connections. For you and I think right away we were pretty similar. Like, hey, we had different career paths, and then we ended up finding this thing, and like, we both sucked really bad at the beginning. Mm-hmm. So it was like really relatable. You were ex-athlete, so was I. So we just had like a lot more common ground than I'm necessarily going to have with, like Yvette's a great example. Like, dude, she's a mom with 4 kids and a successful husband who like beats people up part-time for a living, and like, comes from a much different like upbringing than I did. But I know why it's important to Yvette for her to go out and win big, because I spent time getting to know her and understanding, like, dude, it's just important for her to be really successful part-time so she can do extra stuff for her kids, as an example. So instead of just doing that once, this was kind of like, hey, don't forget that you have more than one person that's different from you on your team that you can like get to know and start to build better relationships if you can understand why it is so important to them. Everybody's looking for different things. Somebody's why could be, hey, I just want to be able to like help my sister make their car payment. So this is going to provide a small enough income that I can help do good for my family member. It's not necessarily that like, hey, I want, to get this to a spot where I could technically never work again. Everybody has different stuff that they're looking for. And so I've just been trying to slow down with a lot of the, new agents that we're bringing in and understand their entire picture and learn some of the stuff that they've gone through that we can tie into, hey, this is why you can get through it here, because you've been through so much worse outside of like getting a few no sales and having some difficult weeks. So I've been trying to do a lot more of that and be a lot slower getting to know people on a little bit deeper level so that you can have more reason to help them and then bring them back to like, hey, you can get through this because you've already done it in a much harder setting.
Yeah, I mean, to your point, it's better to go deep and build deep relationships with 5 people than it is to have a really shallow relationship with like 50 people. Because then you can pour everything into those 5 people, and then they can pour into the next 5 people, and you can really build a depth of knowledge there, right? But if you're just trying to just churn people over and over and over again and bring people in, that's never going to work, right? And that's what we did well early, lost it for a little bit, and that's what we're doing well again, is like building good relationships, that take a lot of time to build, but that's how you help people be productive, profitable producers, which is what we care about. So I appreciate it, dude. Do you have anything else you want to wrap up with, or anything that you can relate to building a business that you want to share with everyone before we wrap this one up today?
This is it so far, dude. That's all I got to share today.
All right, awesome. Well, thank you all, and we'll see you on for the next segment.